Okay, we have 20 minutes to solve all the world's problems, answer all the questions, and figure out why gold is exciting and beautiful and concerning and maybe even scary. And this is from a gold guy. What is really happening with the gold price and what does that really mean? I've got strong theories, and they're very, very important questions. And believe me, as someone who was a former hedge fund lottery ticket winner, punk, who had to listen to sell-side people pushing me private equity, venture capital, sports deals, Hollywood movies, tech ideas, I have a very cynical nature, and I typically wonder, where am I going to get screwed in this dialogue somewhere? Who's got something that they're not telling me? So you can believe that or not. I do have a bias. But this is coming from someone who didn't understand precious metals at all 20 years ago. I was all stocks and bonds, tech, and there is good tech, by the way. I'm not here to criticize tech. That was during the dot-com era when you could throw a dart at the NASDAQ, and if you had enough leverage and the right family connections and somebody at Goldman Sachs would get you in a pre-IPO, you could make a lot of money. It didn't mean you were smart at all. But I had to get smart later because that's a responsibility, as you all know. When you have something to lose or when you have something to preserve. It's not just about getting wealthy, it's about not getting poor or poorer. And it's about preserving what you have. That doesn't mean I'm against speculation, doesn't mean I'm against risk, it doesn't mean I'm against opportunities and all kinds of other asset classes. I'm not a gold-only person, I'm in my mid-50s now, I'm not as handsome or smart as my kids or my son, and I'm thinking differently, like many of you in this room, about what matters to me and the next generation for my family, because the last generations didn't think about that for me as much as they should have. So these are important questions. And again, I'm going to start with why this is exciting. Of course, the freaking gold price. Look at the gold price. I don't care what it is today or yesterday, even tomorrow morning. I just look at the gold price. A year ago in South Africa, it was half of this, and I was saying gold's going to go meaningfully higher. What does that mean? What's the price next year, Matt? I don't care what the price is next year. I'm looking at the price and the purchasing power and the absolute secular direction of this asset, not its speculation price measured in a fiat paper currency, whether that be a dollar, a euro, a Canadian dollar, Australian American, or a Swiss franc. I just know it's going to be an important asset class for me and my son's kids, because I'm done trying to count my wealth. I'm too old to enjoy most of it. I don't mean that in a smug way. Nothing's more stressful than being under financial stress. Any of us who've made our own money know what the good times feel like and the bad times feel like. So there's no arrogance in saying we remember that, so we think generationally ahead, and that's why I look at precious metals. It's interesting that I'm an American. I know that's not the favorite kind of person to be these days. I get it. I haven't been an American in 20 years as a full-time citizen, but it's still my home. I'm still very patriotic. But we have to talk about America for many reasons, and we have to talk about American currencies for many reasons. The dollar, its famous US 10-year treasury, the famous IOU from Uncle Sam. Not because I'm an American with an American bias, but we all know, as the world reserve currency, what happens with that debt, what happens with that currency, what happens with that politics. It all affects everybody in this room, no matter where your permanent zip code is, whether it's in Holland or whether it's in France or Germany or any place in the world, because it is the world reserve currency. So, as thinking like an American, getting an American perspective, it does matter. And when I think of an American that most of us in this room would know anyway, it's Ernest Hemingway, the classic Ernest Hemingway. You may not like him. He was a flawed man, but he wasn't stupid. He'd been through a couple world wars. He was a veteran of the first one, a journalist in the second one. And he said something 80 years ago that's far more intelligent than any frickin' central banker in Brussels or in Washington or at the Bank of Japan or the Bank of England. And I want to start with this because we're going to end with this. And I use this quote all the time. You don't need to speak fluent English to understand it. But basically what he was saying, it's not going to quote it verbatim, but he was saying this, again, not a PhD in applied math, not an economist, not a central banker, not a CEO at Morgan Stanley. He said, whenever a nation gets into an embarrassing level of debt throughout history, you get political opportunists. First thing, opportunists. Almost every politician's an opportunist anyway, in my opinion. Very few of them serve the public. They're careerist mavens who serve themselves, and I know a lot of them. So when you get into a debt crisis, you have political opportunists who give you temporary prosperity. Basically the black card, the Amex, credit. They give you the temporary prosperity, which is always followed, after too much debt, by the permanent ruin of currency debasement and war. So think about these words: political opportunists, currency debasement, war. Now that, as an American, I can clearly tell you, the first, the second, and third part are very easy and obvious to see, left or right, red or blue. When it comes to war, I was born during Vietnam. Family members were in Vietnam. Someone who grew up in the 90s, most of my friends went off to Iraq and Afghanistan. There isn't a time where I can't remember my country in some direct or indirect war. I have literally been to cemeteries where my classmates sit now. But without being dramatic, let's not kid ourselves either. What was Iraq? I'm an American, I'm a patriot. Iraq was a war based on a lie. We all know there were no weapons of mass destruction. It's not an anti-American thing to say. It was a lie, and it was about oil. You can debate whether Zelensky is the next George Washington or Putin's the next Hitler. It doesn't matter. That war was about rare earths, minerals, not just NATO, and freedom and democracy. Venezuela was not about taking a bad guy off the streets of Caracas so we didn't have drugs in New York. That was an oil deal. That was a rare earth deal. In a lot of ways, the Ukraine was a rare earth deal. Greenland is not about vacation plans for Trump. There's interest there. And the regime change in Iran, whatever you think of the Middle East, is not about democracy in Iran any more than it was in Iraq. So war, Hemingway got right. As America got more desperate, it got more militant. I believe that with every cell in my being because I lived through it, I saw it, we all see it, we all have different opinions. But let's get to the more obvious case that has a lot to do with this thing right here, which is the other thing that Hemingway warned about throughout history, was currency debasement. Currency debasement is basically a way when you're in debt up to your ears, you inflate away your currency to pay off your debt. You take that powerful thing called the US dollar, like a glass of Bordeaux, and I'm from the south of France now, it's where I live now, in the Medoc area. My son and I go there every weekend, take a great bottle of wine, a great glass of wine, you add water to it, what do? You ruin the flavor, you ruin the punch. You do the same thing with the currency when you expand it and print it and mouse click it. We did that starting in 1971. You all know we went up the gold standard. That meant Nixon and every president afterwards could print as many or mouse click as many dollars as they wanted to pay for as much debt as they needed. Who wouldn't be addicted to that? If you could legally get away with going into your basement every day, pushing a button, adding a zero to your balance sheet, and not being arrested for it, you'd do it for whatever thing you needed to do. But when we did that in 1971, we debased the dollar by over 70% within 3 to 4 years. Versus gold, the dollar's lost 99% since 1971. Think about that. 99% of its purchase power gone. Well, that's just 1971, Matt. That wouldn't happen again. We actually did it in 1933 under FDR, when he confiscated citizen golds at $20, revalued it at $35, and the dollar lost 69% to help pay for the debts of the Great Depression. So debasement and war wasn't just something Hemingway made up. It happened twice in the 20th century. And that's why we're here today, because it's the same frickin' thing, and we're all living in it right now. And history is hard to see we're in the center of it. There's kind of a comfortable normalcy of the abnormal, which we think will be sustainable. And I'm no fun at a cocktail party. I'm not against the world. I don't think it's going to crash and burn. We're not all going to be huddling with our knees in a corner and running from guillotines and the mob. But the world is changing. And what do I mean by that? Well, America's in debt. It's broke up to its ears. Going back to Hemingway, the year of my birth, debt in the home of the world reserve currency was $250 billion. That seems like a lot of money. Fast forward today, I'm not that old yet, it's $38 trillion. We all know that. $38 trillion. $250 billion to $38 trillion. The home of the world reserve currency. And of course, there's a global problem too. 30 years ago, global debt was $30 trillion. Today, it's $354 trillion. It's gone up by more than 10x in that short period of time, and productivity is only a third of that. So if you have that much debt and that little income, and you run a business or a household or a boarding school, that's not going to be sustainable unless you can debase the money and create the money. If you think that's a crazy idea, it's happening every day all around us, from Brussels to Washington, D.C. So that is the debasement that Hemingway warned about. So we have a debt crisis, but you'd say, well, the world reserve currency can handle this. And that was what they said in the 70s. Our currency, yeah, we can handle it, but you know what, all you Europeans and the rest of the world, it's your problem. That is American exceptionalism. That is the America of Clark Gable, Marilyn Monroe, the flag of Iwo Jima, Moreland in Vietnam. That was the BS that I grew up with. That was the American dream, American exceptionalism. Our currency, your problem. Thank us for saving you from fascism and giving you Marilyn Monroe, and now you'll do whatever we're going to say, since 1944. Okay. And that worked for Americans, and it worked for the dollar. It kept it stable, because at the same time we created a petrodollar. Within a few years of decoupling from gold, everyone in the world has to buy oil in US dollars, and we got OPEC to agree basically at knife point to that deal. But it was brilliant, but it was a good deal. The whole world has to buy energy in the US dollar. Oh, and then we created futures contracts and swaps. You guys won't know that. It's meant to be wonky. It doesn't matter. It's a way of legally price fixing the gold price down. We're the world reserve currency. We make the world buy our dollars. And by the way, we use fancy Wall Street tricks with futures contracts and swaps to take care of the only thing that would threaten us, which is natural gold price discovery, and we squeeze it down every day with shorts by the big banks from Wall Street to London. I know it because I was there. I know it. I did those trades. I know it. I know how the sausage is made. So that was our currency, your problem for a long time. But when you go from 250 billion to 38 trillion in debt, now it's our currency, our problem, and your problem. Because when I'm that much in debt as Uncle Sam, and I'm whipping out IOUs, and you're forced to eat that sandwich and pay my IOUs because I'm America, well, when I'm in that much debt, you start to question, do I want to take debt from that guy who is so much in debt? Do I trust it? Do I want to buy his US 10-year treasury, the sacred cow of the global SWIFT derivative and Eurodollar system? Not so much. Well, by 2022, when we weaponized that neutral reserve currency against a major nuclear power, whether you like it or not, Russia is a major nuclear power. It's the R in BRICS in bed with China. When we did that, we went a step too far. And the rest of the world, whether they were friend or foe of Russia or friend or foe of America, said, if Uncle Sam can weaponize what is supposed to be a neutral reserve currency, do I trust that IOU and that dollar the same tomorrow as I did yesterday? Everyone raised their eyebrows. We were BS'd, excuse my French, with headlines about freedom, democracy, and fascism versus freedom, and George Washington, Zelensky the hero, and Putin the bad. Again, it doesn't matter. That was a distraction. What was going on was far more serious. And right after 2022, what happened? Central banks started dumping US treasuries all around the world because they saw the writing on the wall. They bought 3 times more gold each year after 2022, after the sanctions, than they did before. Now central banks own more gold than they do US treasuries. That was unthinkable 5 years ago. Now the petrodollar is sold 20% not in US dollars, but in euros. That was unthinkable. And by the way, the last 2 people who tried to sell oil outside the US dollar was Muammar Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein. It matters a lot to America who tries to sell oil outside of the US dollar. We will go to Greenland. We will do regime change in Iran if more people try that. The problem is we're not as trusted anymore, and we're far more broke. These aren't the confessions of a gold bug or selling my book. This is history in motion. This is debasement, because the world is dumping our IOUs and they're turning away from our dollar. That's not a trend or a meme or a headline. It's happening right now as we're sitting here counting our wealth in euros and American dollars or Swiss francs. And sometime long ago, I stopped doing that. Not because I thought gold was going to go from 1,200 to 3,000 to 5,000. No, I just realized that the measure of my wealth, that unit of account, was a beautiful ice cube with an American eagle. But that ice cube was melting. I was measuring my wealth, which I was so proud of as a young .com lottery ticket punk, in an asset that was losing value. Whether you have millions or billions or 100,000 or 5,000, and you're proud of it, you're measuring it in something that is lying to you, because your government is debasing that currency to pay its way out of its debt. And in America, not only do we debase our currency to inflate our way out of debt, we openly lie about the inflation rate. Openly. Everyone on Wall Street knows this, guys. Everyone. Even the bulls. So if the debasement trade is happening, the world is de-dollarizing, inflation is misreported, your governments are, I call them the island of misfit toys. They have the mental, mathematical IQ of a 3rd grader. It's like a high school nightmare. Imagine going back to your high school. The dumbest kids in the class are suddenly in your parliament. And that's who's running our system. You have to get critical thinking. It's way past left versus right. It's about math. It's about history. This has been done since ancient Rome. Certainly the Dutch Empire knows something about debasement and empires rising and falls and currencies going away. The Portuguese knew it in the 1500s. The Romans knew it. Weimar and Zimbabwe are too easy. There were tons of cases. The British, now the America, Yugoslavia in the 90s, just about every banana republic in South America. We have a banana republic balance sheet in Europe, and we have one in the US. As yields are rising in the bond market, gold is still rising. When inflation is high, gold is still rising because inflation is more honest than because gold is more honest than the inflation scale or the politician left or right near you. So does this mean the world's coming to an end? The world's de-dollarizing? No. Does this mean they're going to be a gold-backed BRICS currency or a gold-backed dollar anytime soon? Not directly, but indirectly. What's happening right now in the BRICS and now slowly in the West is gold is the new FX reserve. Mathematically, we're almost there as the new FX reserve. In practice, it is the new strategic reserve asset. If you don't believe me, ask the Bank of International Settlements, the biggest central bank, the central bank, right there in Basel. I drive by it all the time on my way to Zurich. Don't really like the BIS, don't really think their immunities are fair, but don't have to like them. They are the BIS. And they made gold the tier 1 asset over the US 10-year. That should have been headlines. Headlines, it's massive. And that COMEX market that got up every morning at 8:30 and put hundreds of billions to shorts on the gold price to keep the price down, well, last year they didn't have enough gold to keep doing that because all the counterparties wanted the gold off the exchange. So there is now free price discovery in gold. That was a huge moment for anyone who knows markets. Of course, it's too wonky for the masses to understand. Most of you in this room who are brilliant probably didn't even know that. That was a watershed moment. 2022, weaponizing the dollar, watershed moment. 2025, the COMEX basically fails to deliver. Fails to deliver. Everything's going right out the door. For a Wall Street person, that's a watershed moment. 2022, 2025, as big as 1971. The de-dollarization, the BRICS, the stacking of the gold, the BIS calling gold a tier 1 asset. Morgan Stanley, for God's sakes. My daughter was at Goldman. I was in German banking. Every partner at von Greyer's was a banker in Switzerland or the US. We know how banks work. For Morgan Stanley to confess a 25% allocation to gold is unthinkable. That's blasphemy in the banking world because the dollar is sacred. Don't talk about gold. Keep it off the balance sheet. Don't mention it to your clients. I know that because I was one of those guys who worked in one of those banks and I saw the BS. You don't tell that narrative in a bank. I'm sorry. All my former bankers know this. One of my partners was 25-year managing director at Morgan Stanley. He knows this. But now even Morgan Stanley has to allocate the gold. Jeffrey Gundlach, the greatest bond trader in America, the bond king after Bill Gross, wants 25% for gold. So it's not just gold bugs like me selling my book to make you a client. What von Greyer's and Gold Republic are doing, whether it's for high net worth clients in my world, in Switzerland, in a hole in the ground, or whether it's for retail investors or high net worth investors in the world here in the Netherlands, or anywhere else in the world, offering you this pet rock, this analog asset that stares back at you and does nothing, as that's what they say. Yes, it does nothing but hold its value while your currency is melting like an ice cube. So your central bankers aren't going to protect you. Trust me, they're not. They're going to, even today, I was talking to Alexei Powell saying, I don't worry about the gold price. That's an absolute lie. He worries about it every day. That's what Volcker worried about. That's what Kissinger worried about. That's what Nixon worried about. Every day after we went to the gold center, they came into the Fed's office like little children. What's the gold price? What's the gold price? Because a rising gold price is a middle finger to the fiat paper money system that we all in this room, myself included, live in. I'm not going to say 100% gold. I'm not going to stop using euros and Swiss francs and American dollars. Of course not. I'm not going to go to a grocery store with an ounce of gold and get groceries or close a car deal or real estate deal or my daughter's wedding with a 400-ounce bar of gold. I'm going to save in an asset that holds its value more than that paper money. And I just want to conclude with that because I could go on and on. I'm very cynical, but this is math. Don't just listen to me or read my books. Do your own homework. Be a critical thinker. You're successful. You're all in this room because you did some critical thinking. You were not like everybody else. Look into the history of money. Do more for yourself than your politicians and central banks will do for you. Consider gold as an allocation, not to get rich, but to keep you from losing the purchasing power of the currency you measure your wealth in today. I think that's what I want to leave you with. This is not just a beautiful piece of art. It's a piece of history. And we are living in history right now because history repeats itself. As they say in France, le plus ça change, le plus c'est la même chose. The more things change, the more they're the same thing. We're just going through a credit cycle, folks. It's a dollar cycle. Don't get caught at low tide with your pants down. Don't have to hide everything in gold. Just get some gold to protect you. You don't have to be a client of mine. Just get some gold. I'm religious about this. I want people to understand that. That is far more important to me than one more fancy vacation. I want you guys to understand this. And it means a lot that you think for yourselves. If you do get educated on this, this is far more than just a great piece of art. Like I said, it's part of something you need to know. You can doubt it, you can challenge, you can look at other asset classes. I'm not here to say only gold, but it should be very serious because we're going into very, very serious times. Not mean to be a downer on a cocktail party, but it's important. It's better, when did Noah build his ark? He built it before the rain, not after the rain. And the rain clouds are everywhere, folks, in terms of the monetary system. It's changing right in front of us. So there's an art and a history and a beauty to this piece of metal right here. And I just hope some of this resonates with you and gives you something to think about. There's still plenty of time to protect yourself before the rain. So that's what I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Ladies and gentlemen, Matthew Piepenburg. Thank you, Matthew.